Welcome back. It's JSHOCKYALL, Germs. I'm going to do a painting of my grand doggy. Her name is Honey. So let's get into it. I don't know why I put that palette knife out because I don't even use it. But here is all of my supplies. I prepped my canvas with gesso and red acrylic paint. And I'll put a list of all these colors in the description. I'm not really sure why I'm holding these brushes up because I don't start with either of them, but I do end up using both of them throughout the process, and they're cheap. I just find a shape that I like, and I don't know. Sometimes I like a stiffer brush, and sometimes I like a softer one. I'm still kind of figuring out all that stuff. I just recommend trying everything and finding what works for you. I go in first with my darks, and on this particular painting I focused a lot on her eyes and muzzle, and I put most of the effort into that area and wanted to keep most of the detail and focus there. And you'll see as it progresses how little attention I give the background. The strokes I have put back there are, I just mixed up a color on my brush, and occasionally I just like to look at my reference and find another place to inject that same color elsewhere to further unify everything as it comes together. Really, I'm always looking at tone is my priority, and I'm not a master of mixing the right tone, but I'm trying hard all the time. Then I'm looking at whether it's warm or cool, and really the last thing I'm considering is what color it actually is. But if something looks blue to me, I don't care necessarily if it's the exact blue that's there. I'm more concerned about it being the right tone. That also gives you the opportunity to have a lot of fun with the color. If you're not stressing out about making it the exact color you're seeing, you get the chance to use your artistic license a little more, and it's just fun. I'm always telling myself this is just a painting. I try not to take it too seriously. If it's not fun, then what's the point? I tried to record this once before, and it was 5 hours of painting time, and I squeezed it all down to 30 minutes, and I did the voiceover, and I slept on it, and I listened to it the next day. I watched the video, and it was so boring. I mean, it was just, I think, being quarantined, I don't know how many days this is now, but I had a rough couple of days the last few days. It's weird how it affects you, and I'm definitely having a better day today. We've been exercising and trying to get in the sun, and it's day by day. And I really do hope everybody else is doing well. So here is a jar that I keep my gal kit in, which is this. I really like the gal kit. It's a fast dry medium, and it gets tacky, and it's easy to paint over and layer up the next day. And that's Terpenoid brush cleaner. It's right here. I take the price tag off and turn it sideways for bonus points. And then linseed oil, which I did not end up using at all. And I have various brushes of those cheap brushes, and then I have some Tyrrole brushes that I use a lot also. So this is day 2 on this. I remember that first night after I started, it was just about an hour of painting, and it was really late because I'd waited until everybody was asleep, and it just, I was grooving for a minute, and then the painting just started getting away from me. I think I was thinking about it too much, and I felt like I was making bad decisions, and if I don't know why I'm putting a tile of color there, I don't want to be putting it there. I want to know why I'm placing each shape of color and tone. I try to be very thoughtful and get lost in the meditation of that process. That's when I feel like I'm the most productive painter. Sometimes it's necessary for me to just take a step back and stare at it for a while from a distance, especially. Sometimes I'll take a picture of it with my phone and look at it smaller. That will give me a better idea of things happening. The lighting on this day was terrible, so seriously, thumbs down me if you don't like this lighting. Just give me a thumbs down. I was very, very pleased with how dark I was able to mix a black with that palette. This palette that I started using on the last painting that I did. I got this palette from Mark Kreider. He's a guy on YouTube, and he teaches a whole method of painting. But really, I'm just a big fan of his color mixing theory, and I highly recommend it if you're a painter. And the benefit of having a limited palette like this, especially during the COVID-19 quarantine, is that it's cheap. Even without the quarantine, I mean, it's cheap. I try to buy the best paints I can afford. I want the highest quality possible, and buying 5 colors versus buying 10 is a little more accessible for most people. And I could just watch this time lapse of paint being mixed all day. And my favorite part is when I scrape it up with the razor. It's like mowing a lawn. I just love that. I remember dancing around these tones here, just the body in general. It took me a minute. So this is the 3rd session on this painting, and it took me that long to really kind of get the courage to move past these dark tones around the eyes and the muzzle, because that was very important to me to kind of get in there to make sure I didn't screw that up before I did any of the other stuff. But then even here, I'm just bouncing around doing the rest of the darks over the rest of the painting, because I started doing that body and then I was like, oh, too scared. And here I really went for it. And that's what it takes. You got to go for it. You got to say screw it, and you can't be afraid to mess up the painting. I find myself getting in trouble over that too, because I think there's a fine line between finished and overworked, and so creeping up on that. And I could definitely spend a lot more time on this painting, and it's not the best. It doesn't end up being the best painting in the world, but just as far as my skill set goes and what I've painted in the past, it's I'm pleased with the outcome, and it was a lot of fun. So, score. And there's mowing that paint off of that palette. I love watching that. And there's the tool that I use for that. You know, I remember looking at this and thinking it was cool. And then I think one session I forgot to wear my glasses, and I just kept looking back at the reference. I was like, oh, that looks greener, and I'd put green in there, and then no, it looks bluer, and I'd put blue, and then I was kind of back and forth. I don't think it was this part here, but that's one of those moments when it was getting away from me, and I probably stepped back. And that left ear, I'm not sure why. I ended up leaving it untouched for a while. But for the most part, what you see here, minus the collar, is where I spent the most time and put the most detail, and you know, was trying to create a little bit of contrast between the foreground, midground, and background. Midground being Honey's body there to the left, and then you'll see the background later, but I wanted less and less detail moving back, and contrast in general is just a big thing that I'm thinking about a lot. I want contrast between dark and light, warm and cool, contrast of, you know, edges, and the size of shapes, and the size of the brush that I'm using even changes as I move on to the background. And the more contrast that you can provide, the better it is to look at, or the easier it is on the eyes, I guess. Painting Honey had me thinking about the first dog that I ever had that I can remember. His name was Casey, and we had just moved to a new neighborhood, and Casey took off down the street, and I ran after him, and when I got caught up with him finally, he was in this lady's yard, and she barreled out of the storm door and cussed me out, and was just so frustrated that my dog was in her yard, and she let me have it and told me to stay out of her yard and keep my filthy mutt out of her yard. And I don't know, that's just a weird random story. So that green on the body there is a really good example, I think, of what I was talking about earlier. That was definitely not the color in the reference, but it was green to me. It had a green hue, so I definitely exaggerated that and just put those big strokes in there, and you'll see the payoff in the end when it's surrounded by the other yellow and orange and whatnot that I used on the body. So something else I would add is on her face, I really did try to see every shape for what it was and place it accordingly. But the further I got into the background, the less I cared about that. I didn't want to do an exact statement of the reference. I just had fun with it and tried to make something pretty. And I think that's important. I think art should be pretty. It doesn't have to be, you know, and everybody has their own definition of what pretty is, and I respect all of those. But for my art is what I mean. I want it to be pretty. I like color. I like color a lot. And I like caking that paint on like frosting. The gal kit that I use helps with that a lot. It gives it a nice little flow. definitely still trying to figure out how much of that to use. I'm just experimenting a lot, and I do want it to dry by the next time I paint on it, enough that it takes the next layer of paint well. And a benefit of oil paint is that it can stay wet and you can work on it for weeks and keep blending it out. But I wasn't trying to paint on this for weeks, and I like coming back the next day and being able to layer up. Scraping her down. I wasted so much paint too. It's embarrassing. I'm just a terrible person in that way. But I put the paint out, and I need an eyedropper or something, and I could put a drop of linseed oil on top of it, and it would last a lot longer. But like I said, I wait till my family goes to sleep, and sometimes by the time I get set up and going, especially having to record it all, it's I'm also just tired, or I'm not feeling it. So I do what I can, and I need to be more aware of how much paint I'm putting out versus how I'm feeling, I guess. Finally got into that ear. I'm taking a shop towel, those blue towels there. I always have one in my left hand, and I can wipe my brush off with that, and I can also move paint around on the canvas with that. So I will sometimes rub the background into the foreground and vice versa for more of that unity. And I really only come back to the face and the collar. Like the gal kid had it dry, and so I was coming in, refining those edges, fixing some tones. I really go into the muzzle a lot, and I feel like it got away from me for sure, and I never really recovered from that. But again, in the end, I was happy with where it was, and it looks like honey, and that's the most important part, I guess. I definitely didn't nail her expression either. She had a very different expression than what I was able to capture, but it still ended up getting the likeness. I had this idea of taking my friends that I follow on Instagram, just photos that they've taken randomly that inspired me, and doing paintings of them. I thought that would be a fun series, and I got this off of my daughter's Instagram. That's kind of where the idea came from. So that may be something I pursue. And I had a lot of fun here with the rings on the collar. Adding white highlights to stuff just reminds me of tattooing too, so that was fun. Before this is over, I want to say hi to my mom, because I know she's watching. Hi, Mom. I love you. Her and a lot of my other family are essential workers, so they're all still working. Thank you guys for doing what you do, and every other essential worker, for real, like grocery stores, doctors and nurses, obviously, but gas stations, everything else I can't think of because I'm just stuck at home all the time. But thank you so much. I love you, Mom. So I hope this has entertained you or inspired you in some way. And if you guys are doing anything creative, you should film them and put them up so you can share with the rest of the world what you're up to. Whatever it is you're doing during quarantine, you should share. I'm definitely going to keep filming stuff. I have other projects that I'm filming now, and I'll get more comfortable recording this stuff, so hopefully it gets better. And there goes my signature. And I'll show you the finished painting straight on and my terrible lighting. And there she is, honey girl. All right, stay safe, wash your hands. Thanks for watching. Bye, y'all.